My name is Lee Chabin, and the subject of this video is Bargaining with God, a Mediator's Perspective. This video is part one of two, and the discussion here will largely focus on part of the Torah, the Bible, Parshas Vayeira, and in particular, how Abraham bargains with God in order to try to save the city of Sodom and other cities and their inhabitants. I may use a little Hebrew in addition to my English. I'll try to use both, so I hope not to confuse anybody. Before actually looking at that Torah portion, I'd like to say just a very few words on mediation, what it is, what a mediator does, because I think that will help you understand what my perspective is and where my perspective has come from. Mediators deal with people who are having a conflict. I happen to work a lot with people who are getting divorced, with couples who are having some difficulties, with different kinds of family issues and some other kinds of situations as well. But there are all kinds of subjects, areas that can be mediated, international relations, and when we come to part two of the video, we'll be talking at some length about that. There's special education mediation. There's mediation between neighbors, landlords, and tenants, between environmental groups and industry, and it goes on and on. In any case, the work mediators do is to help people to sometimes to figure out what they themselves need, to help parties express their needs, to listen and understand each other, which can be very difficult, and in family situations, well, in others as well. But when people are emotional, that's something that can keep parties from listening to each other. But when there's a third person in the room, and therapy is works in this respect similarly, by there being a third person in the room, better communication often takes place. And once communication is improving, mediators work with parties to help them talk about different ways of going forward, creating options. What can be done here so that you can reach some kind of agreement, so that you can both or all of you can go forward in productive ways. Another word on conflict is that there are situations where conflict is somehow limited, and an agreement or series of agreements can resolve the entire situation. But there are also conflicts that are ongoing, and just by their nature, there's not one intervention and not one solution that's going to solve the problems. However, by mediators helping parties to improve the situation, things can be much better off for the parties than if things would otherwise remain at a standstill or deteriorate, which can unfortunately often happen without some outside intervention. So with that brief introduction to mediation and what mediators do, let's look to Parsha Vayeira. Parsha has always fascinated me, and I think most of all the section of the Torah reading that has to do with Abraham bargaining with God, asking God to save the inhabitants of the cities. The conflict is monumental. It's a life and death conflict, and I try to imagine, and I can't really just try to imagine negotiating with God, with God as one of the parties. There's going to be a power imbalance, and it's not going to be an easy discussion. Every year, rereading this Torah reading, rereading the Parsha, I admire Abraham for his humanity, for his daring, and more recently, since I've become a mediator, for his approach and communication skills. So let's examine the text, and I'm referring to chapter 18, verse 17, and verses 20 to 33. And the Lord said, "Shall I conceal from Abraham what I am doing?" Rashi has his commentary, and for anybody who doesn't know, Rashi is one of the greatest commentators on Torah. Um, Rashi wrote that God is thinking here that it would be improper for me to do this thing without Abraham's knowledge. I gave him this land, and these 5 cities are his. Now can I destroy the sons without informing the father who loves me? And something I want to know here is the relationship between the parties. Abraham is fortunate to have a strong relationship with God, and having a relationship with somebody else makes communication better in a lot of situations. Sometimes it makes it possible where no communication would be possible otherwise. And perhaps nobody else besides Abraham could have engaged in this discussion with God, because nobody else perhaps had that kind of relationship with God, with Hashem. Learning of God's plan, Abraham begins with humility and courtesy. Abraham asks, "Will you even destroy the righteous with the wicked? Perhaps there are 50 righteous men in the midst of the city. If so, will you destroy them?" And God agrees. If there are 50 righteous men in the city, Hashem will spare the righteous and the wicked as well. Abraham chooses not to leave matters this way. Abraham goes further, and he asks Hashem, again politely, courteously, what if there are 45 righteous people? What if there are 40 righteous people? What if there are 30 or 20 or 10 righteous people? And in each instance, God agrees that if there are, that number in the end of the negotiation, if there are 10 righteous people in Sodom, that God will spare not only the righteous, but the wicked as well. And that's where the negotiation, the bargaining ends. Now, note that the bargaining is very much about the numbers, literally. What if there are 50 righteous people, 45, 40, and so on? I'd like to turn to a different example where the content is the subject is completely different, like night and day. Saving lives, what can be more important? The example I'm going to give is very mundane, very minor. That of buying a scarf. My point in bringing up this example is that I think you may see that the process, also by the numbers, is perhaps pretty similar. So this past summer, my daughter and I, we were shopping in Jerusalem, in the old city, and my daughter found a scarf that she liked. In the shop, the merchant quoted her price, 80 shekels, which is about $20. My daughter, not having 80 shekels, politely said, and again, something that Abraham did, he was very polite. My daughter politely said, "Thank you very much. It's a lovely scarf. I only have 40 shekels, though. Thank you, and have a nice day." We started to leave the shop, and the merchant called her back and said, "For you, pretty girl, 60 shekels. Come, feel the material." And my daughter did come back in, but said right away, I only have 40 shekels, but the scarf is, it's just beautiful." But again, I don't have it, so thank you very much. We started to leave. The merchant called my daughter back and said, okay, 40 shekels. So obviously the merchant was happy, my daughter was happy, and I was happy on behalf of my daughter because she bought and perhaps unintentionally bargained for something that was really lovely. My question here is that the only way to negotiate? And the answer, of course, is no. There are different ways to negotiate. I'm going to leave it at that for now, but part 2 will be online shortly, and we will begin by discussing another way to negotiate. And as a part of that discussion, we will be looking at the Israeli-Egyptian peace treaty and the starting positions and the underlying needs that the parties had, how that the negotiation was successful, and then we'll return to Parshas Vayeira and that discussion between Abraham and Hashem. Thank you for listening and for watching, and Shabbat Shalom.